Hi everyone, Zach here, and welcome to lesson 102 of this RTS tutorial series. I want to start this video by offering an apology. I owe you an apology for two reasons. Actually, really three at the end of the day, but I'm going to group two of them together. First, there's been a delay in my videos, I realize, and that's been due to the COVID situation and my workload outside of this YouTube channel. I have been working 12 to 14-hour days, and it's just been leaving no time to work on the series or these videos or to do much of anything. And I apologize for that. I said I would not have massive delays in my series, and I have. It started about a few months ago, or actually a year ago now, with some other stuff happening in real life that then led into delays and then the COVID situation. The other apology I owe is that I said we'd be doing certain things in the series, and we haven't been doing those. And on reviewing the last few videos I've edited, I have not done a good job teaching the material. So my goal moving forward on this series, and as I record other videos for YouTube, is to focus on better teaching, is to bring back those elements of my teaching that made the earlier part of the series what I thought was worthwhile. So I'll be bringing those back. Now that said, because I've already been speaking for about 90 seconds now, in this video we're going to start updating some of our material to interfaces. In one situation, the main reason we're doing this video, we're going to address a bug. So if you're working in 4.26, you'll have run into a bug a few videos back that isn't resolved. And if you are running on an earlier version, you'll have this bug, but you can resolve it by unpinning and repinning things. If you're not sure what I'm talking about, I'll be showing it at the very start of the video. And I'll be giving you the challenge of updating every time we cast to using an interface. And so I'll do a second interface or a second update to one of our already existing interfaces to show you how you can do this. That said, the start of this video is a bit rambly. I explain why we use interfaces over casting. I go over some details. If you want to skip ahead to the actual tutorial part and get away from the sort of didactic teaching, look at the timestamps below and you will find the start of the actual tutorial. All of that said, the series has been brought to you by my Patreon sponsors like Random Number Generator. And now all of that said, fire up your projects and let's get started. Hi everyone, welcome back to the editor. Now I know I said in the last video that would be taking care of some of the game logic. However, on editing that video, on thinking about comments I've received from viewers recently, I have decided I want to take a different approach with this video. And what I want to do is I want to make one update, just one in this video. And that update is the thing that we've been looking at as a potential problem for a bit now. If we go over to this blueprint, enemy pawn, we always get this error. And this is because I was using a little cheat method to get around stuff. Now, if you're working in 4.26, any other version but 4.26, you'll get this to work. You can use the unpin method, pin things back in, and it works perfectly fine. Actually, you have to pin it the other way around, sorry. And it works perfectly fine if I can actually get that to go in there. We compile and it can run. If you're in 4.26, it actually won't let you do this because this is actually not correct. We're using two different class files and we're trying to work against inheritance. We're trying to go from a child into a parent. That's what this is actually doing, which is why it keeps giving you that error message. And it works when we're testing stuff. If you actually had build with this, this would not work. And the reason why we did this is, well, one, it was the fastest way to do it at the time, but two, is it stopped us from having to cast. And I said at the very start of this series that I wanted to do so in such a way that I would teach you guys how to do some smart casting. And to be fair, at the start of the series, yeah, I kept to that. But as the series moved on, as we started to add more and more things to this, we really weren't casting properly. When we're in our player and we're casting between our pawn and the controller, fair enough. We want that to be there. Now, we've started casting to the units, we've started casting to the buildings, and that's a problem. And the other thing that I noticed in my work is I stopped being clear in my teaching methods. I stopped being as clear as I would like to be when I am teaching somebody. And if I were a student watching the last couple of videos, I'd be a bit annoyed. So, I'm going to do something I did in one of the earlier videos, and actually in the first section. I'm going to give you a challenge at the end of this video, just because doing it as a tutorial would take way too long. That said, the one thing we're going to change will show you how to go about achieving what I'm going to ask you to do. Now, why is casting so bad? So let's talk about some stuff before we get into the actual lesson. And if you want to skip ahead to the actual thing we're going to be doing today, go ahead and look in the description below. You'll find timestamps. You'll even find it on the time bar for when the actual sort of, hey, we're making a change starts. So why is casting so bad? Well, casting is both bad and good. Let's talk about first what casting really does. Casting is a method of communicating between the class files, or in this case, because we're working in blueprints, of communicating between different blueprints, of communicating between our camera pawn and our player controller and vice versa, for example. Or communicating between our player controller, where our inputs are all stored, and the buildings when we wanted to do something. The other method of communication, which we have seen, we've seen it with our marquee selector. So if we find our marquee selector, because I can't remember quite how I laid this out, since it's been ages since we've been in here. There we go. There's an interface message in there. Sorry about that. This on input hold right here is our interface message. Interfaces allow us to communicate between blueprints or between classes as well. By the way, you might notice these little marks, either a green arrow or green plus sign or a red check mark. That's because I put source control back on for this version. Now, what's the difference between a interface? We've also used interfaces, by the way, if you remember, with our displays up here. So what's the difference between an interface and a cast? Well, now be mindful in C++ and also in Unreal when using C++, it is a bit different than when we're working purely in blueprints. So, when we are working purely in blueprints, what happens when we cast is that we are creating a hard reference of that blueprint file. We're creating a hard copy or a deep copy. Now, if you're not familiar with what deep copying is or shallow copying, it's C++ material. Don't worry about it too much right now. If you're really interested in that, I will be doing in my game development using C++ series, when I get back to recording that series, a section on deep versus shallow copying. Now, what does that mean in our case, though? What is the take-home message for you? Well, the take-home message really is that what we're doing is we're actually creating a full copy of everything. So let's just pop open the character controller again for a second. Let's pop open the camera pawn. Now, in the camera pawn, we got really nothing in here. We got no events. We just have these objects. Well, when we cast to the controller, or to the pawn in here, what we're doing is, so there's our pawn, is we're actually copying the sphere, the spring arm, the camera, and we're making a copy in here. When we cast to our game state, let's open up our game state, because this is going to be a little bit more interesting to see. Sorry, it's under game settings. We are copying all of what we see here, all of the functions, all the variables. We're making a copy that's stored in this blueprint. Same for the MarqueeRef. We actually, since we're already using an interface, we should be changing this. So, by the way, for the challenge, for those of you still watching this part, this one and this one you're going to want to change for the challenge. Especially this one. We already have the interface set up for this. I can't believe I did this. I actually might show you how to do this one because I'm actually really bothered that I've done this. And I'll leave you to do this one. You can, if you want, redo this one as an interface. So that's going to be the challenge, by the way, is to change over the casts to interfaces. This one is perfectly fine, actually, because it has nothing in it, and we kind of do, in terms of encapsulation, it's fine to have that copied. So the other reason besides the hard copy is we want to adhere to encapsulation. We don't want the game controller or the player to have access to the buildings. And we do actually cast in here, to the buildings. We go to our references, which is somewhere in here. There we go. We have all these references, and one of them is to our building, the construction preview and the construction master are part of our buildings. And we're getting all that information, and we don't really need it. We don't need to store it. And in terms of encapsulation, it's just bad. We're not keeping like with like. We're not keeping our code clean when we do this. Now, why am I saying all of this? Well, if we go back here, the issue is, and especially again if you're working in 4.26, this won't work. So if you want to update to 4.26, we're going to have to fix this at some point. So what we're going to do in this lesson is we are going to use an interface, and we're going to create an interface to get to our training post. And then I'm going to challenge you to replace any cast with an interface call. So why is interface better? Well, interfaces, again, I don't know why I named this folder library. Interfaces allow for you to communicate without making those hard copies every time you cast in a blueprint. Now, when I said about smart casting, that's what I meant. We're only going to cast once. We're not going to keep making multiple copies. So we're only going to make one copy of something. And we're only going to do so when we need it. We should have been using interfaces outside of those points. And I just started neglecting that as the series went on. And something you can do if you really want to have some fun with this is go to one of your assets and click your size map. And you can see everything that's in there. And that's 55 megabytes. Bytes. And we extend that out. We can see we have the marquee selector copied right there. I'm not sure why we're getting a skeletal mesh, but okay. That's from self. We have, well, I'm not going to dig through all of those right now, but you can see the marquee selectors right there. You can see that it's getting things, occupant info. Oh, that's why it has them. Actually, this is a great example. Sorry, I was going through this quickly. The blueprint itself, if we weren't casting, is 1.9 megabytes. It's currently 55.5. Why is it 55.5? Well, we have the ground vehicle, which is casting to all these other things. We have the occupant info. We have the unit master. We have everything, all these things that we actually don't really need access to in here. Now, if we go to our interface, and let's pick an interface I know that has a lot attached to it. That's lighting, sorry. Our marquee selector, or actually let's pick our occupant info list. We just saw that one a second ago. When we go in here, we have that same size. Well, we have that same size because it's communicating all that information that we've casted to. It's copying here. But we only have one of those. Instead of having multiple copies, instead of having multiple units, this one will always just stay that size. But as we add more units, we are using up more memory to run our player controller and our camera upon. So it is better to have the copies stored in one place. It makes it cleaner. So what we're going to do, and again, yes, the sizes are the same between the two when we're not playing, but as we play and as we add more units, the player controller, which we just looked at for the size map, will get more and more bloated. So, all that rambling done. Let's update our enemy pawn, and let's get rid of this issue. Now, if you really felt like it, yeah, you could just pull off of here, if it's the right type, and cast to it. That is one option. Again, I'm getting a little bit disgusted with how I did that. So I'm going to instead, like I said, use interface. We'll go to blueprint. We'll create a blueprint interface, and I'm going to keep my same naming convention I've been using here, which again is not the best naming convention. It'll be training post interface. Let's just pop this open. I'm going to pin it into the correct window, and I'm going to create, well, I'm going to use the one function that's already here called GetTrainingPostReference, or GetTrainingPostRef. And this is going to be a bit of a weird one in that I'm going to put one return in, and it'll be called training post. And it's going to be of RTS training post blueprint. And I'm just going to save that, or compile and save. And what's weird about this is, well, we're going to put this in a class where we can't actually put in something into that training post. We are going to use inheritance to our advantage. We're going to go to our building master. And in here, all we're going to do is go to our class settings. We already, as you can see, have that one interface, which is already calling up a lot of information. So again, we don't really need a cast in this. And we're also using interfaces there. So we've already been doing this for a bit. Anyway, we're going to find the RTS training post interface we just created. We're going to compile and save, and you notice we have in here our GetTrainingPost. Now, we're not going to override this. We're going to do nothing with this, in fact. What we are going to do, however, is go to our training post, because our training post now has the same interface in it. Now, you might not be able to see it. Now, one thing you could do is show inherited. You just see the variables. You're not going to see the interface as easily, and I don't like having that on in this project. But what we can do is we can search for our training post. We can do this get training post. Oh, that did not actually work. Let's try that in a different way. Let's go to our variable, our functions here, and go to override, and we'll do get training post ref. There we go. And as you can see, we now have our get training post down here. So if you see that little arrow, these mean they're overrides. Now, we do not want the parent. What we want to do is just plug that back into there, and off of here, because we're in the training post, we can get a reference to self, because this is the training post and we're passing out the training post. So it's the right type. We can just do that, and we can compile and save. Now, this doesn't resolve this issue. Not one bit. So what do we do here is, well, we need to change this variable type. So this is building master. I'm just going to unplug everything for a second, otherwise this will break. This is list of training posts. Well, what we can do here is just change this to RTS building master. Yes, we want to change the variable type. We're going to get a whole bunch of things we need to change. In fact, we're actually going to leave this open. I'm going to move it to a side window for now, though. I'm going to plug list of training posts back into there, and I'm going to plug that back into there. Now, if we went ahead and ran, well, we're going to run into some issues. It's actually not going to find a training post. The AI is doomed, it says. Well, that's because it can't see this as a training post anymore. So if we go back to here and see everything we've changed, we have this enemy pawn. Well, this is the one we just changed. We have this enemy status check. This is the one we've just changed. We need to actually just very simply do that. See, that was fairly simple. Actually, what I'm going to do in here is make sure that none of the other ones have gone off. And in here, well, we have to do the same thing, but we're going to have to take it a step further here. So we're going to spend the rest of our time in this blueprint. Let's just move all these over as needed. And this one always gave me an issue for some reason. We're going to just unplug that for a minute. Plug that. Also, we're going to unplug these for a moment too. There we go. And notice that can't go into there, and that's fine. That's actually kind of what we expect. Let's move that. Let's plug that into there. And we can't plug that into there, so we'll come back to that in a moment. But we can plug this into here. We can take our index and min value, plug that into there. And we're going to make some other changes. But before we go on and make those changes, let's change this variable, which is a local variable, to our RTS building master. Yes, we want to change that variable type. We're going to get that little pop-up again. And that's fine. We're going to pass. We also need to change this to RTS building master. We're going to pass this out through there. I'm just going to tuck that under there. I know I haven't been doing that elsewhere in the series. Plug that back into there. Fix that up. Okay. So, what's the warning in here? Yeah, I know we're still getting errors. I want to get rid of that warning message. So what are we going to do in here? Well, we have that set. So we go through. We see, is this greater than 0? So are the training posts yes. If not, we clear out everything. If there are, then we check the training post to see if there's 1. If there's 1, well, we just get that index, and that is our training post. If it isn't, then we go through here and we pick which one has the shortest queue. Now, what are we going to do here? Well, what we're going to do to actually set this is we're going to use that interface we just made. So we can pull off of here, and this is going to work as our object type would in casting. We're going to do GetTrainingPostRef, and we want the message here. So we are asking the interface to get this information and send it back to us. And from here, well, we can get our list of units to be trained, and we can add that to our list here. And we can also set that back into there now. And, oh, well, let's go to our selected training post, see what's going on here. So in our event graph, apparently I skipped some steps, we need to repeat what we have just done a moment ago. So select training post, compile. Interesting. Let's unpin this for a moment. We want to know, is it still valid? Let's just compile that for a moment. And we're going to change this to building master as well. Yes. And we're going to get that little pop-up again. Sorry, it showed up in my other window. And we're going to plug this back into there. There we go. So let's bring this in here. So we had that one. We just did it. Let's go to this next one. We have this issue now, which what we're going to do for that is fairly simple. We're just going to move that pin into there. And why does this work? Well, remember, the recruitment trigger is actually already in the master. So by doing that, it should now work. So if we hit play and move up here, we can see it's training and its AI is ready for action, and that our units are on the move. So that it cleans up one of the errors from earlier. It also makes this project work in 4.26, and also it's better if you package it, and it shows you what you need to do in order to achieve the challenge of updating where we cast. And again, let me just pop open our player for a moment here. And again, I recommend it. These two definitely need to be changed. You can do this one if you want, but find all the casts and start using interfaces. Actually, in fact, this one right here, we are just going to do together so you can see how this works. So I'm going to close everything except for the player controller now. And I'm going to go over to my interfaces. Actually, I lied. I'm going to go over into my blueprints. I'm going to go into the HUD folder. I'm going to find the marquee. And I'm going to go to the class defaults because I can't remember what the name. It's marquee selector. That would have been really easy. I'm going to pop open the interface this way. And we have our original events here. Now, something to note, by the way, on interfaces, just so you're aware. If you have something like this, this is an input event. So it's like when you go into here and you have the on-tick. You have this input action, or you have a custom event. That's what these ones are, because there's no return nodes. So these are all just actual events. What we're going to do here is actually do a proper sort of function. Not that there's really much of a difference between a function and an event, but in Blueprint there is. So we're going to add new, and this will be GetMarqueeRef. And all we're adding into this is one return node, and it's going to be of our type RTS marquee selection. So, now before we do this, actually, I just want to Control-S save everything. I want to go back here for a minute. I want to see how much of a difference this makes. It might not make much of a difference with the marquee selector because it isn't the biggest thing we're copying. If we go to our size map here, in fact, it's It's actually one of the smallest things we're copying. It is 344.9 kilobytes. So we might not see much of a difference when we do this, but I want to see how this affects that just a tiny bit. So we're going to search in here for our RTS Marquee Selection BP, and this will be Marquee HUD, or MarqueeRef, let's just call it MarqueeRef. We're going to compile, save. We'll return to our RTS Marquee selector here, and what we'll do is, well, let's compile this as well. There we go. So when we recompile this, interfaces now shows up. If we click that, you can pull off of here and just do a reference to self. And we can save this. Let's go back to our player controller for a minute. Let's go to our reference cast. In our get HUD, what we can do is, because the HUD object type is the same, or because this is a HUD, and that's why we use get HUD for object type here, we can also do get MarqueeRef as a message instead. We can unpin this, and we got rid of one of our casts. Just unpin that as well. And we can plug that back into there. We can plug that back into there, and we can fill that back in. And look, it's going to take a moment to compile. We save it. Let's just make sure it still works before we look at the size map. And it still works. We selected our units. We're able to move them around. I've deselected them. I've reselected them. So that is something you can do to make this a slightly better design. Now let's take a look at the size map real quick. If we go to our size map here, well, notice it's dropped in size a fair amount. Now, as you keep going through this and iterating through and removing your reference casts and using interfaces in the way I've just shown you, it will end up being even better. That said, we will in the next video actually get into doing some of these things I was talking about earlier in terms of designing the game logic and getting to do certain things related to buildings for our enemy AI. All of that said, if you've enjoyed this series, go ahead and hit that like button down below. It really does help the channel out. And remember that you can help the channel out by subscribing and liking this video. And if you do subscribe, make sure to hit that notify bell so you know when the next video is out. But also by becoming a supporter on Patreon. That said, this series has been brought to you by my Patreon supporters, who I like to thank from the bottom of my heart for all the support and patience they've shown me over the last few months, especially as there have been issues due to the COVID situation that we're all experiencing. That said, I look forward to seeing you in the next tutorial, and I hope that you have a wonderful day.